Om Vedanta Siddhanta Nirukti Resha Brahmaiva Jivaham Sakalam Jagatcha Akanda Rupa Stiti Reva Moksho Brahmadvitiye Shutayaha Pramanam. Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. It is the apt and final conclusion of the Vedanta that all is Brahman, time, space, living beings, and the world. Living in constant recognition of this fact is what is called enlightenment. Brahman is pure and perfect, and one without a second. And the revealed scriptures are the sure and certain proof of this fact. Om peace, peace, peace. Om nahi ginena sudrishyam pavitram miha vidyate tat yoga svaya samsiddhaha kalenatmani vindate. Om shantihi shantihi shantihi. In all the worlds there is no purifier as great as knowledge. The wise beings realize this in time. Om peace, peace, peace. Om sahana, Om sahana vavatu, sahano bhunaktu, sahaviryam karavavahai, Tejasvi navaditamastu ma vidvishovahai. Om shanti shanti shanti. May Brahman, the reality, protect us. May Brahman sustain us. May Brahman illumine our thinking consciousness. May we not find fault with each other, with the world, or with the teachings. And may what we study be a source of inspiration to us eternally. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, and may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om. Welcome here to the live streaming class with some live audience in attendance too, that we are giving at the SRV Association in San Francisco, also known as the Healing Center here near Silver Avenue, for those of you who want to come running over to get in on this spiritual transmission that's going on. We partake of this 4 times a year here in San Francisco on my Dharma visits. And we also have classes in Portland, Oregon, which you'll catch us up there next weekend and the weekend after that in 4 live streaming classes. There we'll be studying the Taittiriya Upanishad under Shankara's great influence, because he was the one that commented on about 11 of the 108 Upanishads that are left. And those 11 have become classics because he commented on them. And of course he did other great commentaries too on the Gita and the Brahma Sutras, and a lot of the Prasthanatrayam, the 3 great landmarks of scriptural history, got his attentions. And we know today's class is about Upanishad, and we'll study the Svetashvatara Upanishad, which is one of the ones which Shankara looked at of those 11, along with the Kato and the Keno and the Mundako and the Mandukya and others that are now translated into English and into other languages since the advent of Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa and Swami Vivekananda and Holy Mother Sri Sharda Devi, the SRV, Sharda Ramakrishna Vivekananda of our organization. And since they have been translated into English, then we get a chance to read them, even some of them as brief as they are. and as intensely packed with dharmic lessons that they are, that apply to this life even though they're thousands of years old. They're quite remarkable when you read them, and some of them can be read in a matter of minutes, like the Mandukya Upanishad is 12 slokas long. You could read that in a minute. Of course, understanding it wouldn't take a lifetime, but nevertheless, that was commented on by Shankara's teacher's teacher, Gaudapada, who wrote the great commentary on that Upanishad. Just one Upanishad he commented on. That became the most famous of all commentaries of recent time particularly, but even influenced the Westerners and the Western philosophers, because they'd never heard of non-duality in such a religious, cosmological, and philosophical sense, because philosophy in the West quite often a matter of debate and argumentation, but with Gaudapada it was a matter of confirmation of the lasting truths that the seers have brought forward into the scriptures. In fact, that's what I was just chanting at the beginning of the class. Vedanta Siddhanta were the first words I uttered today, which means the conclusion of the Vedanta. So the conclusion of the Vedanta is what? That all is Brahman. All this is Brahman. And certainly you could hear that and walk away saying, wonderful, everything's God, and then start having all sorts of problems in your life, and seeing all the violence and seeing all the different vagaries and vicissitudes of this world come forward on all fronts, at work, in the news, in the newspaper, whatever the case may be. And then you'll say, well, how is it that all this is Brahman? And you would have a philosophical, maybe your first philosophical conundrum there to try and unwrap. But then you would begin to understand, after you approached a teacher, say like Shankara, like he had some 18 or 20 disciples that were very astute, having been raised and born in India, amidst the Dharma that has been so long lived there for millennia, these Upanishads particularly. And so you'd find I'd probably have to go and see a teacher and explain that. What did you say about all this is Brahman? How can I understand that deeper? And it was, oh yes, well in that case you should know that Brahman cannot be a material object, Brahman cannot be an energy, and Brahman cannot be a thought form. Those are all evolutes of nature, you might say, or evolutes of the brain in the case of thought, or evolutes of the prana in case of the energy that's operating your eyes and ears and nose and the senses and so forth. Prana is doing that. Man does not live by bread alone, Christ said, means there's a prana inside of you that's allowing you to feel, taste, touch, hear, and smell earth, air, fire, water, and ether. Those fives we talk about. Cosmic quintuplications, as we've been calling them. I just finished a book called that, Cosmic Quintuplications, and that'll be released later this year. So you'd approach the teacher and he'd start to explain to you, when we say all is Brahman, we mean, like Vivekananda put it, Brahman is not in the world, but the world is in Brahman. Or as Krishna put it in the Gita, I am not in them and they are not in me. Then he said, but for those who love me, then they realize I am in them. And they are in me. So first of all, it means you have to use your discrimination between the real and the unreal. That's a Vedantic classic teaching that Shankara was one of the ones to capitalize on, to emphasize for us, that you can't really live a spiritual life. You may live a religious life, you may live a life of morality and ethics, you may be a good person and all that, but a spiritual life is set aside as something very unique for those who separate the wheat from the chaff. If you're still living in a mixture of wheat and chaff, then you're eating a mixture of what's really nutritious and what's not necessary, you see. So if that's still the case for you, it's okay. You can rise out of that by degrees. As Ram says, spiritual enlightenment happens by degrees. But in the case of those who have seen the truth and they want the truth to set them free, if their eye has been made single and they want to be set free, then they will do that process of separating the the transcendent from the relative, if you want to put it that way. Vedanta also often uses those words, real and unreal. Unreal simply not meaning necessarily just illusory, but changing. What changes all the time is unreal, because it doesn't have any firm basis. It appears to you differently all the time, and to your senses, and your senses themselves are changing. And they're connected to a brain that's always changing. Sometimes it's balanced, sometimes it's restless, sometimes it's slothful. That's the three gunas of nature. So how can you depend on anything, senses, gunas, elements, nature, this shifting sands Christ talked about, how can you depend on any of it to give you a true rendering of reality? For that, you're going to have to go beyond all of those things. So my point there, that discrimination between the real and the unreal is a hallmark of Vedantic thinking. Viveka, our Swami Vivekananda took that name before he came west, because he thought the Westerners are very materialistic, they're good people, they're generous, and so forth, or at least we were back in his time. I don't know what's happening to the West lately so much, but non-coveting of other people's goods, non-violent, by nature. It doesn't mean you can't defend yourself, but it does mean that you don't go looking for reasons to go to war to covet other people's goods and take over countries and dominate species. Those are called Astabala Siddhas, and the 8 occult powers. Astabala Siddhas, the 8 occult powers. Those are eschewed by everyone from Sri Krishna to Sri Ramakrishna, the bookends of India, the recent Kali Avatar and the Avatar of Vishnu. So, so this discrimination process is very important to Shankara and to the whole line of teachers, Advaitic teachers that go far back all the way back to Sri Krishna and even to Sri Ram prior to him. The oldest avatar on record we have to think and sing about, Sri Ram, whose birthday was recent. We worshipped it in our Hawaii center not too long ago. But so what is, if you say all is Brahman and then all of a sudden you say, well, there's lust and there's anger and there's greed and there's envy and there's jealousy and there's pride and there's delusion and there's pride of caste and there's pride of lineage and there's grief and there's shame and there's worldliness and jadedness and there's ignorance and there's attachment and there's aversion and there's egotism and there's fear of death and there's doubt and there's brooding. And there's lassitudinousness of mind and heaviness of body. You want me to go on listing all the passions, fetters, despoilers, vikshepas, distortions that are present in relativity, and you're going to tell me that all of this is Brahman? See, so you better, if you're going to assess reality and keep God sacrosanct, then you'd better do it in this classic way that is faultless, so that does away with all of those problematic issues that are clogging people's minds and therefore not allowing them to meditate on Brahman, on their true nature, naturally and spontaneously. You should be able to be at peace all the time. I was telling someone just the other day, you see, that if you go to work, just remember all of this is unreal, sort of like a flow of events, phenomena it's called, and you're the witness of it all. And how it affects you is your testing ground. If you come back from work depressed, then you failed a certain test that you had. If you come back elated, you failed the test. If you come back balanced, you're all right. You should just keep that balance all the time. See. And don't give in to these dualities that are constantly rising and falling. Like it's trying to study an ocean. See, all the waves. How can you count them? How can you assess them? How can you measure them? How can you contrast them? How can you just say there's an infinite amount of them? Well, those are the waves of the mind. The karma shaya, the waves of karma. You see, that's a part of the collective and individual mind. If you were to rise above the collective and individual mind, you'd get to the cosmic mind, and there you'd see Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, whose minds are very perfect and pure. And many souls go to them. You get to the Father through the Son in Christianity. So if you go to Christ, or if you go to Buddha, or if you go to the Trinity in Hinduism, then you've risen above the transmigrating species of ancestors, mankind, animals, plants, insects. That whole round is going all around in circles all the time. It's called samsara, or Maya, in terms of how Shankara put it. So those things we want to rise above. How do we do that? Is it a location we can run to somewhere in space and time? No, you're going to have to rise above space and time as well. All these things are projections of the mind, and so they're going to rise and fall all the time. The Advaita once said to one of his students, ignorance is unreal. So how can it cause you any real doubt? So then it makes you all of a sudden look at your doubt. Where's my doubt rising from? You see, coming from somewhere I don't know, like the curtain of nescience, which we'll look at today. It's coming from somewhere I'm not aware of, like my deep sleep state. I'm not aware of things, see. So there's time when my mind goes unaware. In fact, for some people, maybe most people, their minds even aren't aware in the waking state. You could make a case for that, couldn't you? They're walking around sort of sleeping while they're awake, as one song in India says. Oh mind, you're sleeping while you are awake. So awaken, you must, as the line of the song reads. So this ignorance is unreal, so how can it cause you any doubt? So you'd look at doubt first, you'd see that it has no real substantial basis, and then you'd see that it's rising out of your ignorance, and you'd do away with your ignorance by knowledge. One thorn in your flesh is ignorance. The thorn that you take to remove it is knowledge, and then you toss both of them away. Well, we're going to get to that in one of these charts today too, how there are 4 ways for the householder to renounce the world. It's a great teaching in the Jivan Mukti Viveka. It's a great scripture that many of us haven't read, but it's right along the line of those Advaitic teachers like Shankara that we're speaking of this morning. Shankara's birthday has already passed a few days back. Buddha's birthday is tomorrow, full moon. It's going to be Buddha Purnima, the thrice blessed one he's called, because he was born on a full moon and he got nirvana, his enlightenment, on a full moon, and he passed away out of the body into nirvana on a full moon. So that was a kind of a physical and cosmological landmark that people noted. So in May, then, we worship Shankara and Buddha. They're great bookends, speaking of bookends, too, in India, because one is a staunch Advaita Vedantist, the other is Buddhism itself, really. And we see that, as is mostly the case, the great teachers always acknowledge each other. It's their followers that fight. See? But the great teachers always acknowledge each other. So we look at Advaita Vedanta next to Buddhism, say particularly Zen Buddhism, you'll see so many correlations. The terminology is about the same. Tomorrow I'll give you a class on some Zen Buddhist teachings. There's one teaching called the 3 worlds. Well, in India, we know about the 3 worlds, apparent or external, subtle or internal, and transcendent. Unless you're going to call them Bhur, Bhuva, Swaha, then they fall in a 7-world kind of spectrum. The 7 realms, or lokas they're called. But if you talk about them more generally in a wider category, the 3 worlds, you're talking about gross, subtle, and causal, or transcendent. In that case, then, you have that teaching from India finding itself into Zen Buddhism in the recent century, see, in 1900s. So you have to look at that and see how the Buddhists treated the 3 worlds, which is a concept right out of India, and that's a very interesting thing. So we'll look at that tomorrow. Basically, they call it Kamaloka is here. We would call it the external realm. Kamaloka. You can understand what that means? A loka is a world. What's kama mean?
Desire.
Desire. So this is the world of desire here. And Zen Buddhists, will give you the teaching on what's here, what kind of beings are here, what they desire, and how they can transcend Kamaloka for Rupaloka, the realm of formless form. And then after that, how they can get to Arupaloka, the third world, means totally formless. Where you could even be in a form, but your mind is in a formless state. Sort of like seeing all this as a mirage or an illusion, and just knowing that from your own witness standpoint. Your Busho, they call it in Zen Buddhism. Busho means like our Atman in Vedanta. Busho is Buddha nature in Japanese, in Buddhism, Zen Buddhism. So all of those correlations are there, and these great beings, these great teachers, you could probably say of most merit and most note since Buddha was Nagarjuna, and of most merit and of most profundity since Vedantic time, Vedic times like Vedavyas and so forth, was Shankara. Those names stand out in more recent times of the two pillars that form the platform of Buddhism and the platform of Advaita Vedanta, philosophically speaking. So that's why today we want to jump into where we left off last week. 2 months ago, last visit. And if you remember, we were on this chart and we went through the whole thing. It was the last thing that we did. So I'm leaving it up here, and the live streaming audience can take a look if they remember back that far, some 8 or 9 weeks ago, where we looked at this disappearance of ignorance and some of the beautiful quotes that were on there. Now that was in accordance with chapter 4, sloka 18, those of you who are following the text in the Svetasvatara Upanishad. I can read that to you. When ignorance is dispelled, which is then why I put together this chart for you to see it as a visual. When ignorance is dispelled, there is neither day nor night, neither being nor non-being. There is only that auspicious one who is imperishable, who is worthy of being adored. From that one has proceeded all the ancient wisdom. So, if you were watching live streaming 2 weeks ago in Hawaii, we took up the ancient wisdom. And I have a new chart which probably won't be shown in San Francisco this time. If you watch the live streaming in Portland, it will be shown. It will also be at the retreat on the Columbia River Gorge 3 weeks from now. If you can come to that, I'm going to be teaching about manasana, the posture of the mind. So I'll show you in accordance with that I think the chart is called the manifestation of India's revealed scriptures on earth, and how that is looked at. Basically, they look at it in 3 or 4 ways. Did it come from the intellect of ordinary men, the scriptures? Some of the scriptures seem to have, but not the revealed scriptures. The revealed scriptures came from the highest mind, Ishvara, or the seers. But ultimately, if they tried to trace an origin, and this is always the case with India, anytime you try and trace origins, you find out there is none. It's a kind of a conundrum, is that you must embark on the tracing of origins. Whether it's the origin of why I burned my hand when I put it in the fire, you've got to trace that to the cause. Oh, fire burns, and you make that conclusion and be free of ever doing that again. That's on a very rudimentary level. But then there are effects in your mind and in your actions, which come from the mind, basically, that you're not tracing the effects to. Oh, I do a certain act, and then later I get a karma from it. And then when I have the karma come to me, I don't understand where it came from. Oh, it was because of this act you did some time ago, you see. Vivekananda used to say, the more spiritually advanced person, their karma comes back to them right away. So they can put the effect with the cause and understand why that karma happened to them, good or bad, or mixed. But with the unevolved spiritual person, that's not the case. They do an act, and it takes a long time for that act to manifest itself in the cycle of causes and effects that are going on, and recur to them as some horrible happening, or some seemingly undeserved happening that's good, or mixed. Mixed is sometimes the hardest kind of karma to bear, because you don't understand where it's coming from and why it came. So my point being, you're going to have to trace the cause, the effect. That's called tracing origins. Utpatti is the Sanskrit word that Lord Vashishta uses for it in ancient times in India. But they have you tracing origins of everything, not just the physical universe, this world. That's just physics. Looking back into a cosmology that's purely physical. But you haven't yet reached the inner worlds to know that the outer worlds came from the inner worlds, in the same way that the actions you're engaging came from your mind. Your mind said, do that act, and then you acted. See? So if you could control your mind, you would control your actions, right? Good, bad, and mixed again. So a perfectly self-controlled person is a totally balanced mind and is not engaging with most things. If they do engage, it's in a very careful way in this world. Very careful not to create a karma. Like Sri Ramakrishna said, a bird flies through the sky, but it leaves no trace. That's kind of a way of explaining how there's going to be no karma for that very sensitive person. They're going to move through the world, but they're not going to leave a trace of themselves anywhere. Nothing that can get back to them later. Nothing to pay later, you see. No karma to pay. So they're very careful in engaging in everything that has to do in the world of living beings on the physical level. But they also know that the reason that they're doing that is because that came from mind. All actions, all worlds came from mind. All these objects are just thought made concretized. I'm sitting on one of my own thoughts right now, my pillow, you see. I'm reading from one of the Rishi's thoughts, the scriptures. So the whole thing is mind. Both the Buddhist schools and the Advaita Vedanta schools have that teaching. It's all mind. And so what's beyond mind is what interests them, you see. What's beyond creation, preservation, and destruction. Because where there's creation, there's going to be destruction. So where there's inception, there's going to be conception, and finally deception. You see? And deception in the end gets burnt away, you see, and then you suffer. Either, maybe you even suffer along the way, instead of living a perfectly contented, peaceful life. So this is why tracing origins is so important for them. So here in this sloka that we were just talking about, from him came this ancient wisdom. From Brahman, from the ultimate reality, came this ancient wisdom. So that means aparashaya is the Sanskrit term. Aparashaya means it's without origin. It's eternal. It didn't have an inception. Nobody put the scriptures, the wisdom of the scriptures, nobody invented them. Nobody thought of them. They went to Brahman and found them there, you could say. See? And so they're permanently lodged in Brahman, which is eternal consciousness. So you would go there to Brahman, you'd draw them out, and then you'd put them into words or letters or pages. That's aparashaya, it's called. That's the highest look at the scriptures. India's always insisted that its revealed scriptures are aparashaya, no origin, eternal. It's the same thing, really saying the same thing, only explaining it in two different ways so that we can really understand that. So this is what he says. He ends this scripture, you see. So as far as losing track of that fact, then you would eventually have what's called ignorance or avidya. So we looked at this chart, and I'm not going to go through it again because we did go through it completely on my last visit, but enough to say that you could see that there were two pathways that were followed. One was a pathway of bhakti, you might say, devotion, and one was a pathway more of discrimination, jnanam. Two wings of the bird, right? You've got to have love for God, and you have to have wisdom of the scriptures and of the seers to get you through, because you're finding yourself in the embodied condition. So if you find yourself in the embodied condition, you have all those things I just mentioned a few minutes ago: lust, anger, greed, envy, jealousy, pride, delusion, and so forth. Our body's all a party to those. And they all come out of the mind. Now, in the case of beings who have a pure mind, they'll come to this world with a pure mind. They won't have lust and anger and greed and envy and jealousy. Therefore, no karmas come with them. Maybe they have a karma for helping others, you see. Remember, there are some desires that are good because they lead you to dispassion, and other desires that are bad because they lead you to bondage. So you have to discriminate again between those desires which are proper and right and those desires which you should stay away from. You should diminish them as much as possible. Don't feel guilty, Holy Mother says, simply because you have traces of lust and anger and so forth in you, because the mind has those. You'll never get rid of them. Any embodied being has them. That is, if you're aware of nonviolence, you're also aware of violence, aren't you? Otherwise, nonviolence wouldn't make any sense. So in the embodied condition, then you have these dualities, and that's why they call the mind manas. It really kind of means dual mind, or you could say doubting mind. Because when the eye is made single, the mind becomes one, and then everything's righted again. But as soon as it drifts off to two and many and distractions and so forth, then it loses its enlightenment, and it becomes ignorant and bound. See? So that's what this basis of this triangle is about: ignorance and avidya. Or those are the same thing. Avidya means ignorance. It means ignorance of your true nature as Atman, right? Ignorance of your true nature as Atman. And so that's something you're going to have to get over. Get over that as quick as you can. So what would be the solution? Remembrance of your true nature as Atman. So on one side you have ignorance of your true nature. You think you're the body-mind mechanism. On the other side, then you remember and say, oh, actually my teachers have told me and the seers have told me that mankind's nature is perfect by nature, not sinful, perfect. Sinful falls somewhere in the middle there, but you haven't gotten this, or kept or maintained this non-dual status yet, that my nature's perfect, now I have to measure myself up to it. It's in the measuring up to it that's the problem. That's going to take work. And people are used to doing work outwardly, activities, but they're not used to doing work on their minds inside. And when they work outwardly, they begin to think, well, I better work on myself. And they think that outward means will correct inward problems. But that's not the case. It's the opposite way around. The outward means both solutions and problems came from the mind. See, it's dual by nature and it holds everything. So you're going to have to get into your mind and find out the difference between the two and take to the right one. That's back to viveka again. Discrimination between what's right and wrong. That's kind of basic. But discrimination between what's beneficial and what's non-beneficial, or what's essential and what's non-essential, that's a higher discrimination you're putting into effect there. Something else is kicking in there, and that's going to take that beautiful word called sadhaka. You're a sadhaka. In other words, you do sadhana. And that's really missing in the West. In Western families, in Western monasteries, missing pretty much. Some prayers there at meal times and so forth, but to do sadhana is really a cutting edge, and you cannot really do sadhana until you learn the Dharma. So you get off the cycle of morality and ethics onto the cycle of Dharma, and then you use that, you put that together with your spiritual practice, and you're free. But very few people make that grade. They'll stay in the moral, ethical circle. They might go to heaven with their ancestors and then find themselves back on earth, not knowing how that happened, cause and effect again, right? Because they didn't look into the causes and effects of their mind. They're not wondering, where am I going after my death? How did I get here at my birth? Those thoughts don't occur to them. They just see Maya and they get into it and wrap themselves up in it like a cocoon. See? So those thinkers who come armed with that discrimination, or with a pure mind already, you won't find them suffering like other beings suffer. The only way they suffer is for you. See? They see you in ignorance and they can't understand why you don't just get out of it. See? So this whole root ignorance was there at the bottom, and then we continued up to see how quickly, if you follow the path of devotion or faith, first there's some excitement there about discovering religion. It's called, he's got religion, you see, or you've awakened to some sort of level of belief in God, call it. There's not faith in God yet, but there's belief. Faith is far beyond belief. Belief can be shaken, faith can't, they say. Faith is like a rock. So your belief can be shaken. So, for instance, if you find your soulmate, they say, someone said to me recently, and then now, they have two different religions. See, they have the soulmates are of two different religions for some reason. See? So then they're going to have faith, you see. If it's just belief, then each one can shake each other's convictions about their own specific religion. But if they had faith, they would go together and eventually realize that all religions are one, in essence, that they all come from the same source. Or as we put it here in SRV, on a t-shirt we put out and a bumper sticker we put out, all religion is indigenous to your soul. All religion is indigenous to your soul. So this isn't just a way to live happily with a Muslim on one side of your neighborhood and a Jew on the other side of the neighborhood. This is a way to live in understanding of the innate oneness of all religion. That's a totally different thing, just to tolerate as compared to understand, comprehend, and participate in the joy of universality, we call it in Vedanta. That's a beautiful thing. That's what Ramakrishna, our ideal, epitomizes. Universality. And he didn't necessarily bring it consciously to earth. He just came here, loved God through all paths, and followed them through all paths, and then in his own natural way just represented what universality should look like. He never stood up and pronounced all religions are the same. See? He just said, I practiced many different religions, and then each of them was a flower. I gathered all those flowers into a bouquet, and I presented them to the Mother of the Universe, Kali, see, to make her happy. That one person at least had figured out the secret of all religion, is that they're all essentially one. They're not the same, don't get me wrong. They're one in essence, but they have different approaches and different practices. But you could see the similarities too in the practices, like meditation is there in quite a few of the religions, and some sort of spiritual practice is there. So that gets me back to this. First there's a little bit of excitement about all that. And then pretty soon some happiness comes to you from believing in God. Then joy when you go more towards faith. And then finally wisdom comes to you along the devotional path too. And then finally contentment, when it's not just happiness anymore. You're content with what is. If things don't come to you, you're content. If they do come to you, you're content. Like I said, whether you make $1 million or make nothing, you're content. Because those are all unreal. Money, gain, loss. Those are dualities of the mind. It should never take you away from your Atman, which is peace itself. You have shifted your stance, or you've allowed yourself to be pushed off your square, your balance, and that's not acceptable for a practitioner of yoga. Beyond that, there's peace, which surpasses even contentment and happiness and joy. A peace that passes all understanding, as Christ called it. And then there's equanimity, samatva, just your mind, like I just was saying recently, your mind just becomes almost transparent, as if there's no mind to influence anymore. See, there's no set of thoughts that are your own anymore. There's no ego involved in possessing knowledge or regretting ignorance. Those are gone. See, it's a very beautiful. It's one of the treasures of yoga, actually, samatva. There are three great treasures: samapati, samatva, and the combination of concentration, meditation, and samadhi. Samyama it's called. And then finally you get bliss at this apex of this path. Over here on this knowledge path, it starts really with the Dharma. You're seeking knowledge. As I said, you get off just the basic fundamental teachings of religion, some stories with some morals and all of that, which haven't gone very far to enlighten you. They may tell about how someone else got enlightened, but they're not enlightening you. They're just entertaining you temporarily and giving you a little inspiration. So you proceed towards Dharma, and that is that eternal teaching that I was just talking about that is there in Brahman. You're going to have to move towards it and seek it. It's a higher level of teaching. You might be called the difference between knowledge and wisdom. Knowledge can be of things of the world and mixed things, but when you get to Dharma, it's starting to talk about things that transcend the world. But that could also help the world very much if they were implemented into your life, teachings of the Dharma. And it goes on to a holy company, like here, the saying is, Milarepa, whenever I contemplate the teachings of the Dharma, I cannot help but share them with others. So you would go to holy company, not only to share what you know with others, but to find out how you can broaden what you know. There might be others in the Sangha who know more than you, who have more experience, who have lived longer in divine life, whose initiation came long before yours, and so forth. Because we measure our age in initiation in spiritual life. See, I'm 65, but in spiritual years I'm 45, you see, because I took my initiation back in my 20s. So, and I know a person up in Portland who's not even one yet, but they're about 60 years old. See, so you have to live a year of spiritual life to be a 1-year-old child or a 2-year-old child or a teenager. You see. So it's not the age of your body that matters in spiritual life, it's the age of how long you've been at the Dharma and what benefits you've reaped from it. And so that's leading you towards holy company, Satsanga. As Holy Mother says, the happiness of the world is transitory. The less you become attached to the world, the more you enjoy peace of mind. So she's talking about giving up the world and concerns for the world, just moving again with equanimity through all the events and the phenomena, but gravitating more towards love of peace. See, if your peace gets disturbed, then it's like that's the worst thing that can happen. Avalanches can happen, and earthquakes can happen, and floods can happen, and then they will here, and thousands of people will get displaced and killed, you see. But your peace of mind should never go away because of that, see. Because there is no such thing as death for those who are dying. They're just bubbles popping in an ocean, and they'll reform in some other time. See, nothing, Atman doesn't get destroyed. Can't be burnt by fire, can't be drowned by water, can't be sliced by a sword, as Krishna tells Arjuna. And so go into the battle and do your part. You're birthless and deathless, and so are the people you're trying to kill. See, so armed with that kind of non-dual wisdom, you're the best warrior, or you're the best worker in today's terms, in this battlefield of San Francisco. See, or this battlefield of Earth. You're the best worker and the least affected by outcome. The most impervious to anything that goes on, because you have your peace of mind. So very important there. And it's going to be based on some scriptural study, svadhyaya. And you can memorize some things. See. So last night I pulled from my memory at satsang, Adihi sa samyoga nimitta hetuhu. Parastrikala dekalopi drista. Drista means seer. So basically it means meditate on the Lord as thine own self, seated in your heart. And now if you memorize that Sanskrit, and it's coming from an ancient Upanishad, see, and then you've done your svadhyaya, then you can just sit there happily and think about that. and all the problems of the world will go away. See? Keeping your mind in the Dharma. That's why I put this quote here, which I had to make up. It's one of my own quotes. From peace, a fuller, richer, nobler knowledge will dawn, to be tempered further still by apt instructions proceeding from an illumined preceptor in conjunction with the revealed scriptures. Then, through sententious striving, you shall come upon a state of spiritual exaltation, that truth which you are seeking, and which puts to death even the most delicate tendrils of ignorance. So this is how you will get this peace that passes all understanding. You pretty much dip your mind in the teachings of the Dharma and keep them there. There'll be more about that later. Now, from scriptural study on to contemplation, manana, it's called. You want to not only hear the truths from your lips of your illumined preceptor or read them from the pages of a scripture, you also want to take some time to go somewhere and contemplate them. It's real important. Most people will come to class, hear the teachings, and that's it. See? I even see people taking notes, and then 2 months later when I come, they'll take their notes off and brush the dust off of them, because they haven't looked at them once, you see, in the 2 months I've been gone. You should probably be looking at these teachings the minute you get out of class. Go home, pick up your notebook, pick up the scripture. What was said again? What was the meaning of that? And run that deep into your mind. You know how deep you have to run a structure for a bridge into the mud river at the river bottom, you see, you're in the bay. If you don't run it deep enough, it might shift and you have to do it over later. So you have to run it deep, deep, deep. I was here in this room yesterday, resting, laying down, and over near here I heard this metal, pound, 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 pound. That's the sound of the city route. But what it was they're driving a huge metal stake into the ground, and just, an inch at a time. And I thought, well, it doesn't have to be the noise of the city. That could just be a teaching about how you have to drive the teachings into your mind that way. Just get some sort of machine that pounds them, just call it your willpower, and just pounds them deep, deep, deep into your mind so you'll never forget them again. Well, that's this combination of swadhyaya and contemplation. Swadhyaya is, you read them, you heard them, and maybe you even memorized them, but manana means you went in somewhere and you contemplated them, and then Vedanta Siddhanta, you said, that's a good conclusion, I'm going to accept that. Or you said, I don't understand that yet, I can't accept it. But whatever the case will be, for any given teaching, especially those that inspire you or attract you, you want to make those yours. You know how the mind forgets, right? So you say, oh, what was that I heard again? That was so inspiring, and you can't even recall it even though you heard it yesterday. Well, that's because you didn't drive it into your mind with some mental energy. See, food energy turned to prana energy, turned to mental energy. That's what your food is for, is to give you strength of mind. Not for any other reason. It's not for physical health. That should just be there naturally. What you're really eating food for is to get that energy from it, ojas, and put it together with, make sure it's pure food, and that gives you pure energy, and pure energy gives you pure mind. The Holy Mother put it, you get from pure food you get pure blood, and from pure blood you get pure energy, and from pure energy you get pure mind. See? So without that connection, then you can hear marvelous things all your life, but they'll never stick or lodge in your mind. So you have to do that kind of swadhyaya and contemplation. It's very important. The 3 great proofs of truth, that's one of them. The first is hearing, the second is contemplating, and the third is realizing. And that's how you'll get your faith, basically. Nobody can shake your faith, right? So if someone comes up and said, you're not correct, God doesn't exist, I disagree with you. You told me God exists, but I think it doesn't. But you've done your study, you've done your manana, and you've done your nididhyasana, you've heard, you've contemplated, you've realized, and it's become your faith. And so you say, sorry, I don't agree with you, let's just agree to disagree. See? Because I've tested this with the 3 proofs of truth, and it's now a fiber of my being. God exists. In fact, everything exists all the time. Even when it's gone, it exists. You know what I mean? When a form disappears, it just goes back to the thought. That's its seed. And it'll come forward again when it's thought again. That happens for everything from losing an object to losing a child. You think you lost a child and that soul's gone forever? No, it's waiting to come back again. Have another child. Look at your neighbor's children as your own, because maybe that soul already came back as one of your neighbor's children to be near you, but you're shutting the door to that because you don't believe in, you haven't done your manana and your swadhyaya, and to know that everything is in existence all the time, that everything exists. There's not just God that we have to prove exists. We have to prove that everything exists. And yes, on the way you have to prove on the way that nothing exists. Eternally, isn't it? The pillow disappeared, the child disappeared, so it didn't have an eternal existence. Its form didn't have an eternal existence, but its essence did. And you're not understanding this, you see, so you need to go and pick it up from the words of the scriptures and contemplate it till you do understand it. Run that pylon straight into the riverbank, the deep mud at the bottom of the big, huge San Francisco Bay of your mind until it's there for good. You can pass across it like thousands of cars a day on a bridge, you see, in full confidence that it's there for good. So that kind of power is there in the wisdom path. Then austerity will remove any final doubts around any of those kinds of attainments that you have. See, anything persists that you don't understand, do an austerity around it. That is some sort of a quest. I don't know how to put it in Western terms in an English word, but people are doing some sorts of quests, or they're trying to push the limits. Maybe they want to go run a marathon or a triathlon or something. They want to push the limits of their body and their will, and their breathing and their prana. But here you're trying to push the limits of your spiritual understanding, which is a whole different game, a whole different area. Spiritual fruits are not like worldly fruits, earthly fruits. They act entirely different, and they're obscured by entirely different problems. Things you can't attain here, you can see the causes why you can't attain them. But things you try to attain in the spirit, you can't see what's veiling you from getting those fruits. It's not given to you. So you have to do a practice that removes the veil, and then all of a sudden it's given to you. Knock and it shall be opened, right? As Christ said. So you have to do the knocking. You can't just stand by the door and expect it to open. You'll be waiting a long time, maybe. God has other things to do than open doors for you. So knock, and then you'll get the attention, see. So this all has to do with a very powerful austerity that you would do. In fact, Swamiji says here, the secret of religion lies not in theories, but in practice. That's why there's beautiful songs that we sing about that. That can be, again, memorized if you want, or taken to heart by listening to them. Manre Krishi Karjanana, Manre Krishi Karjanana, Imarmano Jami, Kaire Patita Ba, Kale Falto Sona, Manre Krishi Karjanana, Manre Krishi Karjanana. It says, "Oh, lazy mind, clearly you do not know how to farm. You allow your fertile expanse of your mind to lie fallow. Under proper cultivation, the land of awareness, your mind, becomes golden with the harvest of illumination. Sow seeds with every breath, then," he said. And he goes on about this. Protect the field of your soul with the name Kali, Kali, Kali. do the mantra, in other words. So he says, this song is all about, by Ram Prasad, it's all about practice, sadhana, that you do. Translated nicely by our own founder, Lexiksen, the version I'm using here. So, manri krishi kachjanano, O lazy mind, you do not know how to farm the field of your awareness. It's beautiful. And the rest of the song is equally as beautiful. Talks about the Guru will give you seeds to sow, and then you have to sow them with the tears of devotion, which is what we talked about along this path. And then at the end he says, this dusty troubadour wandering through open fields, that's the mind, pleads with everyone, if you find farming difficult, then bring my poem with you. This song. See? Memorize it, sadhya, and bring it with you. You can't carry a book of poems around all your life, so put them in your mind. And anytime you come up with an issue or a consideration or a problem or a contention, then just think back. And see, I can do austerity, and I can undo anything that happens to me. There's no problem that will face me down. I will face them off. So beautiful in music too. These songs have been put straight from the Dharmic teachings into music to make them more pleasing, if you will, for people, and to convince them of their efficacy, of their benefit, so that they will partake of them, work them into their life. So if you want to go on from there, there's sadhana, austerity, after austerity, and then sampadyate, attainment, is next. Ending in transcendence, or para. So the way Holy Mother puts it here, perhaps one practices japa and austerity in this life. Then in the next life one intensifies the spiritual mood. And in the following life advances it further, and thus spiritual evolution goes on. So inside of this teaching of qualified non-dualism, because we know the soul doesn't evolve, it just stays perfect all the time. But inside of this qualified non-dual teaching that there's a transmigrating soul called a mind that moves from place to place, from heaven to earth to hell, so forth, from inner worlds to outer worlds and back, from childhood to young manhood to adulthood to old age, it seems like there's movement going on. So in that context, she says, it gives this great teaching that do these practices in this lifetime, and then if you come back for another lifetime, you'll be more advanced, the way you see others around you. Like that's what Holy Company does for you, right? You see people who are more advanced, like your teacher. Like I saw Swami Sheshananda when I went to him in my late 20s. Wow, it was like a big light shone all of a sudden. Never seen a person like that in the world. So I have some work to do here, you see. And then you also see people who are coming along, who are just fledglings. Call them kittens. They're just barely opening their eyes to any kind of spiritual truth, and they're a little excited about things, you see. So you tone down their excitement and get them into the teachings, and start turning that excitement into some progress, like she says here. Let's start making progress in this lifetime. Any bit of progress is going to be helpful. That's the teaching, on Buddha's birthday tomorrow. We might as well bring it up. They talked about the Dharma bucket and catching drops. So there's thousands of drops falling around the world you'll never catch in any kind of container. Those are just your everyday events, things that happen to you randomly, as it were. But there are some drops you can catch. Those would be your meditation each morning, your study of scripture, your japa practice, as she says here. Perhaps a person practices japa and austerity, see, and then they make advancement in that lifetime. Well, those are the Dharma drops in that bucket you got. But first you have to get some sort of a bucket in order to catch them. And then you have to go where they're falling. See, that's Holy Company. So the whole thing is put by her in that kind of terms. Very beautiful. That's why so many wonderful songs were written for her, too, to her. Here's like this beautiful one we often sing. Shri Sharada Devi He Mahamate K.V. Puttappa, who's still living, I think, wrote this beautiful song to Holy Mother. I sang that to my guru once, and a little tear came to his eyes. He said, I knew Mr. K.V. Puttappa when I was in India. So a lot of people have found out about Holy Mother, we call her. She's Sharda Devi, Ramakrishna's divine consort and wife, who outlived him by many centuries. By many decades. And actually timeless she is. So by many centuries and millennia too. But that's the way she would put it. And those who find out that she teaches like that in such a direct way and gives them room to grow. It's not like we can just all of a sudden understand God like that, or we should feel guilty because we have forgotten God. None of those will work for us, right? So we're going to have to make this slow, stage by stage effort at practice. That's how ignorance will disappear. Because why? Ignorance is unreal. Therefore, how can it cause any doubt?
What's the translation?
Translation is, O great mother Sri Sharda Devi, whose only fulfillment lies in Sri Ramakrishna, you are the Sita of our age, supremely pure-hearted, and we worship you with great devotion. This is actually Parama Pavana Hridaya Kali Yuga Dasite. So she's Sita of this age, of the Kali Yuga. Sita was Rama's consort back in the Dwapara Yuga, you see. So now this fourth age has come, Kali Yuga, many, many hundreds of thousands of years later, and we see Holy Mother coming back as Sita and Sri Ramakrishna coming back as Ram. They're the Rama and Sita of this age. That's how K.V. Puttappa viewed them in his meditation, spiritual life, with them as his Ishtam, Ishta Devi and Ishta Devata. So, Ishta Devi. So you have beautiful songs like that illustrate and also support great souls like this. This is why we put their quotes on charts and contemplate them with our manana and so forth, because they're worthy of being worshipped. They're worthy of being considered. Their words are wisdom words, nectar for us, for our ears. And all we hear around the world is just worldly chatter, little zeros, and amongst families and workplace and playtime and all that. It's just, there's nothing profound being said. As Sri Ramakrishna said, my ears are burning with the talk of worldly people. When will my devotees come? That was toward the end of his 12-year sadhana, see. It's this very earth-shaking sadhana. And then as soon as he spoke that out into the air, weeks later, days later, Brahmananda comes, Rakal, and Naren comes, Vivekananda, and they start showing up at his door at the Kali temple. Oh, sir, what are your experiences? Tell me. See? And then we know that because the Gospel of Ramakrishna was taken down by M. Mahendranath Gupta and put there for us. A great, great work. So we did take a little more time in this chart than we thought we would, but you see how basically it is worthy of contemplation a second time, and even a couple months later. We can still just extract so much out of it. Now all of that was in accord with that Sloka 18. I figure today we're going to finish chapter 4 in San Francisco, so there's only a few more slokas. Let's go to 19. Still talking about Brahman. No one can grasp Brahman above or across or in the middle. There is none equal to Brahman, whose name is great glory. Mahima is the word in Sanskrit. Great glory. Maha, Mahima. There's just nothing that surpasses the glory of Brahman, glory of God. And it says here, none can equal that Brahman above, across, or in the middle, because it's infinite. There is no borders to it. This is what we were talking about last night in sadhana, right, is that beginnings and middles and ends have never been the strong suit of India. They don't think of time as having a beginning, a middle, and an end. Cycles of time are so long, and a lifetime is so short. That's why people don't know that time is an illusion, because they get caught in it for 80 years. They get free of it in deep sleep or in death. They get caught in it again for 80 years, 100 years. They move in and out of it. So it makes them think that time is real. Oh, I'm in time again, you see. But and so you begin to think of beginnings, middles, and endings, and now your so-called wise men, in this case historians and so forth, are telling you, oh, this particular country or this object is such and such an age. It goes back to a certain age, or you go back to a Pleistocene age, or an age of before mankind even appeared on the earth, and you begin thinking in terms of archaeology and things like that, which are a paravidya, lower knowledge. They're interesting. They give you some knowledge of this world, but they don't give you any knowledge of how this world came into being through these cycles of time. See. In fact, they fall short of the fact that this world never did actually come into being or disappear out of being, because there is no middle, beginning, and end. Do you see one? You can only think about history. See. You can only think about the future, but you're not there. You're here in this moment. And you should be here in this moment. This is where consciousness is. Consciousness isn't in the past or in the future, and people get taken off the path by dwelling in the past, right? And projecting into the future. Oh, I will be such and such, I will do such and such in the future. Meanwhile, that day of their life is wasted thinking about the future. They're not setting up for the future. What to speak of transcending the idea of time altogether in meditation. Oh, I see time just stopped, like Lord Buddha. I think I will insert myself into time there, 550 years BC. I think I'll emanate there. See? And then I will get up out of time, out of the river of time. That was one of his last teachings. If you sit on the banks, then you'll know that time is cyclic. If you stay in the river, you'll never know that, because you'll be swept around in cycles. That is, if you get on the bank, you'll see something go by, and then sit there meditation long enough, it'll go around the cycle and come back again. Then you'll know that it's cyclic. Oh, I see. My ancestor never died. He just cycled, and he came back again as my son or my daughter. And I passed away, and I cycled, and I came back again as his son or his daughter. And I see it's all cyclic. But you'd never know that unless you get on the banks of the river and watch things in meditation from your witness standpoint. Stopping all phenomena is a beautiful thing. It's what you do or try to do in meditation, is stop all events, all thoughts. Not just of your mind, but eventually of the whole collective mind. You're going to want to stop that. That's why meditating from midnight to 4 in the morning while others are sleeping is such a good thing, because most minds have stopped. See, at least in your hemisphere, in your side of the world, they're sleeping. So the vibrations are clear there, and you can see some of these profound things. You have more of a chance of seeing them when you inspect your consciousness at late hours like that. Otherwise, mind feels, like he says here, or in that song, you don't know how to field the farm of your mind. You feel farm the field. Otherwise, there's all sorts of things growing all the time out of minds. And some of them aren't very healthy. And you're subject to them. You're being made subject to them when you should be free of them. See? So anyway, that has to do with everyday life, has to do with your ancestors over time, cycling and all that. If you get out of the river of time, sit on the banks, he said, then you'll come to know these truths, and you'll be the much better for it. So let's go on to the next sloka. That's 20. His form does not stand within the range of the senses. So Brahman cannot be known by the senses. Sri Ramakrishna used to say, you cannot see God with these eyes, hear God with these ears, smell God with this nose. But you can, if I give you love eyes and love ears and love nose, then you can see Brahman. That is, you cannot see Brahman or realize Brahman with this ordinary mind. But if you enlighten your mind, then you can see God. See? Because one of the big pieces of Dharmic wisdom is you can never, realize God, because God's not a concept. It's a reality. It's a principle. So, but what's in the way of me realizing God is my own limitations. So if I outgrow my limitations and I get a pure mind, remember, pure food, pure blood, pure thought, pure mind, then I will see God everywhere. And that's how Brahman is in everything, but is not a thing. Brahman exists as the foundation of all worlds and all objects, but is not a world or an object. Then you're putting this, whether it's an Advaitic koan or a Zen koan, you're understanding it, you see, on a level that the seers would have put it to you. Otherwise, when you first read the scriptures, you're understanding it on your own dwarfed little level. See, you think you're understanding it intellectually like the West does, but because of lack of contemplation and holy company finding out from the teachers, you're not really understanding what you read at all. You're understanding it at the level that you understand it only. So they're expanding you beyond that perspective so that you'll see the truth and the truth will set you free. Now, no one perceives Brahman with the eye. That's much like Sri Ramakrishna is saying. Those who know Brahman through the faculty of intuition, as thus seated in their heart, become immortal. Isn't that what I just chanted about an hour ago here? Adihi sa samyoga namitta hetu. Basically, meditate on the Lord as your own self, seated in your heart. That's a classic Upanishadic teaching. They want you to remove the line of demarcation between matter and spirit, between creature and creator, see? Because that's dualism. You're thinking of, I'm a creature and he's my creator. That's dualism. But if you can remove that line, then I and my Father are one, see? And then you're not thinking in terms of duality anymore. So you merge, and you coalesce. You're going to have to remove that line of demarcation. So it says here, first, the faculty of intuition tells you this. You assume, or you begin to perceive, or suspect would be a good word, that there is no difference between God and mankind. They're the same thing. But you see all the fallacies and faults and imperfections in mankind, and you can't make that assumption very clearly. But you're not looking at the essence of people. You're looking at their ego. Like Sri Ramakrishna said, the Guru is not a personality. The Guru is a principle. As long as you look at the Guru or any person as an ego, then you're fostering the sense of their individuality. Then how can God and the individual be one? But as soon as you look at them as the Atman, as Brahman, as reality, as pure conscious awareness, as timeless, deathless consciousness, and you begin to shift your perspective like that, then you see I and my Father are one. So it's not some strange transformation that takes place. It's a natural evolution of your thought. You had ignorance, you remove it, and everything is back to Brahman again. See, it was ignorance that stood in the way of you seeing that all was Brahman, not anything real. We just chanted, right? Ignorance is unreal. Therefore, how can it cause you any doubt? So if you believe your ignorance is real and you enforce your ignorance to be real, then you will never see that divine reality. As soon as you remove that ignorance with certain practices, then you will see all this Brahman again, including yourself. See? Even this ego will ripen. It'll become the ripe ego, and it won't stand in the way anymore of your progress, she says, lifetime to lifetime. See? So a beautiful quote there. I'll read it again. Sloka. This form does not stand, Brahman's form does not stand within the range of the senses. No one perceives Brahman with the eye. Those who know Brahman through the faculty of their intuition, as seated in their heart, they become immortal. Beautiful sloka. Now let's move on to 21. Some, being afraid, approach thee and think, thou art the unborn, O Rudra. Deign to protect me with that benevolent face of thine. So Rudra is a name for Lord Shiva, but it's the terrible Shiva. It's the Shiva that destroys all things at the end of a cycle. But it's also the Shiva that can destroy your ignorance. You know how on Tibetan thangkas and so forth, you see these wrathful deities. There's even some here in the room on the wall. There's these wrathful deities. They have horrible faces and long nails and so forth. Nails like winnowing hooks, as the poem says. So people think, oh, that must be a devil in the Buddhist tradition. You see, Tibetan Buddhist tradition in that case. But actually those are apparently malevolent, but they're benign devotees, because if you approach them, they'll destroy all your ignorance. And they'll take away all these horrible appearances and show you the benign face of God. So it's a challenge for you to approach a wrathful deity, they call it, a wrathful deity. You should approach them fearlessly and, face them off. It's sort of a metaphor, isn't it, for daily life. If you let things persist that aren't healthy, they begin to grow and turn into worse problems for you. So you should always face off your problems and your karmas we were just talking about, right? Your karmas too, if you let them fester, then that's not going to be good. They will come back at you again and again in a worse form. So you want to annul them that day that they arise. And you probably shouldn't do anything else but make sure they're gone before you move on. Because they're easy to forget, and they have cycles too, and they disappear in your mind and fester back there. And then they come forward again as some effect that you didn't put your finger on because you didn't take care of them in the moment or acknowledge that they were caused. Lots of things are seemingly out of the range of cause and effect, but are influenced by cause and effect. Cause and effect isn't, in Vedanta, isn't just how one planet bumps into another, or how one object comes in contact with another, and how much force there's going to be, and how much magnetism and mass, and how much dispersion there's going to be of particles after the thing explodes. That's all physics. But what you're looking at here is cause and effect in the mind, how a thought causes an act, and how that act then causes a result that comes back to the mind again. And this is really the whole process of leading towards rebirth, belief in rebirth, is that people come back into bodies in ignorance because of that. Now, there are people who come back into bodies without ignorance, so we should look at them and see the difference between them and these others. And then that way we could acknowledge that rebirth is a relative truth. We wouldn't call it an absolute truth in Vedanta, but it is a relative truth. People are dreaming themselves into form again and again without knowing the cause of their dream. There's a beautiful song in India that says, "Oh dreamer, awake, you must, you must." See? Because spiritually awakening is then going to rid you of that idea of ignorance and so forth. You won't blame your birth on your parents or on God, because God's birthless and deathless. You'll know that it was your own doing, your own karma that brought you back. Then you'll face off with your karma and you'll get free. You created the bondage, you remove the bondage. It's really that simple in spiritual life. But if you never know that there was a cause for your bondage, you'll go on thinking you're free and you'll still be bound. Like the glowworm who comes out at night and looks at the moon. See? First it says, "I'm the only light in the world." Then it sees the moon and it's like shameful, you see. There's a greater light than me. So you have to always be moving inward like that towards a greater light. In the remaining time, we just mentioned Rudra. I don't know if we have time, but we can at least show it before the break. Is this teaching on Shiva, how Shiva works through the through his two Shaktis rather, and the four padas and the 5 functions of Shiva. It's a very beautiful teaching that we can look at after the break. Just to introduce it first here, the relationship between Shiva and Shakti goes beyond all types of characterizations. It is a mystery realizable only in the light of self-expression. Tirodhana, it's called, or the opposite of Tirodhana, in consciousness. So self-realization is the whole thing in Tantra, is that Shiva exists inside of you, but it's just being covered by various kanchukas, they're called, or limitations, evolutes of Maya. And in the case of Vedanta, right, that there are coverings, false superimpositions. But in this case, the coverings are self-assumed. In Tantra, you've taken them on. And you're the one that's going to do away with them. So in line with what I was just saying about cause and effect a few moments ago. So therefore, the function of Lord Shiva as an ishtam, as an ideal, is to be there when all of your limitations dissolve. When you dissolve your limitations, you'll see that beyond all limitations is Shiva himself, the Lord. And he has 4 ways in which that can be realized, and 5 functions by which they get realized. So I'll leave you with that much before the break. We'll come back and look at this beautiful chart in accordance with chapter 4, sloka 21, about Rudra and Shiva and those functions that he undertakes for our good. So here, we have run out of time. Live streaming audience can look at this new chart while we are taking some prasad here, and we'll come back in about 10 or 15 minutes. Namaste. We are back for the second half. We spent our whole break just talking. We didn't actually get up, speaking about some of these abstruse philosophical teachings of the Dharma that are so inspiring once you get into them. You can just lift yourself right out of the world. If you can form a habit, as Shankara says, of understanding the scriptures by coming home, say, from work, and then just immediately, doing your dinner or whatever you need, rest a little, and then jump right into the scriptures, and you form a habit of doing that every day, then pretty soon you have an avenue out of work. Not only its problems and its vagaries and so forth, but also its habit. And you'll have a different place to put your mind. And so the seers advise that, and they do that. They spend a lot of their time, as much as they can, in the Dharma, just as Ramakrishna said, dipping the mind over and over again in the ocean of Dharma until it's just saturated with the teachings and it can't think about the world anymore. That is, the problems and challenges of the world become sort of background, and you just move through it in a natural and spontaneous way, because the teachings are shedding a light on every act that you do. And it's a different way of proceeding. I think actually there's even a quote about that, which we will get to. Anyway, we saw from our notes at the break that we had done this chart last time, as I said earlier, and we'd also looked at this chart, so I'm just showing it again in conjunction with Sloka 21. We don't have to spend a lot of time on it, but you can see there, to review, that Shiva's two Shaktis are Bindu and Maya. The two powers of Shiva cause and oversee all the worlds and forms in time and space, and constitute the materials of the universe. So Shakti is at the foundation of everything dynamic, everything in motion, everything apparently evolving. And if you can see that Shakti power in everything, then you have a great key to the secrets of this world and other worlds too. There's a beautiful quote that we've memorized from the earlier part of this Upanishad. Remember what it's Te Dhyan Yoga Nugata Apasyan Devatma Shaktim Svagunayar Nagudam. So Devatma Shakti is the Shakti, the divine Shakti. The seers who practiced meditation, Dhyan Yoga, realized the divine Shakti in everything. That's how that sloka starts off. It's a good meditation sloka. So you meditate on the presence of dynamism here, what animates things, the activities and the results and everything, and the materials too on which actions are being done are all provided by Shakti. You have an advantage over the fact that you think that it's all happening by matter and by nature, because you don't realize that matter and nature are sentient. So they can't do anything of themselves. But when you have a different place to go in that vein of thinking, Shakti, then you see, oh, that's the intelligent animating power in everything. You see, now you're not stuck in Maya and objects and in elements and nature alone. You can always account for those, but you can't account for the intelligent principle in things. Didn't they just say that? No one perceives God with these senses. Those who know him, they know him through the faculty of their intuition. So you can't provide for intuition by talking about matter and nature. You have to talk about intelligence. Intuition is a power, an attribute of intelligence. It's knowingness. Nature doesn't know anything. See, it just happens. It just sprouts trees and rivers, and it's a form-producing machine. But what's the intelligence behind it? So if you come to know the Shakti, hear the word Shakti, and that happened to a lot of us. Oh, I like that word, you see. And then all of a sudden it indicates this dynamic power in everything and gives you a middle place to go to, away from matter and nature, as I said, and towards Brahman, because Brahman has its Shakti, or in this case, Shiva has its Shaktis. So these two Shaktis are adventitious Shaktis, they're said. Shiva has 5 functions to perform through these two Shaktis. He is Satya Sankalpa and Aptakama. That is, his desires have been fulfilled, he doesn't have any more desires, and his sankalpas are all in truth. Any projections of his mind are true. His resolves are all true, and his desires are eternally accomplished. He makes the world evolve so that individual souls can be released through the removal of their impurities. So that's how Shakti works through Lord Shiva in these two ways. Removes our desires and makes our convictions true, you see, so that we can move through the worlds of name and forms and realize our true nature again. He has compassion for us because we're stuck in the world of name and forms. See, we got into the body, but then we thought we were the body. Big problem, big mistake. Primal error. See, we should have gotten into the body all the time knowing that we're not the body, and we're just using the body to experience certain things in Brahman, see. But now the body's real, the earth is real, our problems are real, our suffering is real, and we've created this disease without a remedy. So the embodied souls get into the body, the illumined souls get into the body free of that kind of ignorance, and they leave the body free of that kind of ignorance. You know how Holy Mother put that. And Sri Ramakrishna basically said the difference between an illumined soul and a bound soul is that the illumined soul laughs at the time of death and the bound soul cries. So the illumined soul never did think of themselves as the body. Never did in the first place, but the bound soul always did from its inception in the body onwards, and therefore more births in that condition. So we rush when we hear that to make sure that we illumine our minds, enlighten our minds, and transcend form. We do it in deep sleep. We should be able to do it in meditation, and we must do it at the time of death to have a conscious rebirth. Like some of these great souls, there's Dalai Lama's pictures on the wall here with other great souls. So if you want 12 or 13 or 14 lifetimes as a free soul, then at one lifetime you're going to have to accomplish that. Freedom from form, idea, formlessness. That's the third world, actually. Arupa Loka is the world of formlessness. So you acclimatize yourself to that, to being a formless entity. Doesn't mean that all of a sudden you're dead or unconscious. It means you're superconscious. That everything is in you. You experience everything in you. When you're in this body, you only experience a few little things outside of you. What's the matter with you, you see? That when you reach that higher state, you realize everything is within you, and you have a contact with it. So we don't want to explain enlightenment or freedom as some sort of void. It has essence in it. Form may be absence, but essence is there. See? So we shouldn't make that mistake when we philosophize about this, or when we do our discriminatory practice. Well, there you see, and really quickly again, because we took this chart last time, the 5 kinds of expressions, or 5 kinds of functions actually. Self-expression, self-limitation, dissolution, sustenance, and projection. All Shiva's realm as far as Shaivism goes, this teaching in Shaivism. Self-expression is important in Tantra. And self-limitation is also, you took on the limitation, you can slough it off. See? Like a snake took on the skin and then sloughs it off. You should be able to do that with your bodies. Otherwise, self-limitation becomes binding, and you live in limited way of thinking. I have one body and then I'm going to die and I don't exist anymore after that. That's real limitation. But the idea of my soul is ever free, and it takes on as many bodies as it wants and gives them up easily. That's free, you see. So that's a whole different way of thinking. It's a whole different mental asana. That retreat we're going to take up in 2 weeks or 3 weeks up the gorge. A whole mental asana you want to adopt. Learn how to do that. Then there are also these 4 padas, 4 kinds of works. Shiva maintains philosophical systems, encourages spiritual disciplines, encourages qualification and duties, and also divine and dharmic activities. those are all maintained by Lord Shiva. And of course, divine and dharmic activities would be a real wonderful thing to do if you're only doing worldly activities. Now let's shift everything over to doing dharmic activities, making dharmic money, raising dharmic families, living in a dharmic culture. Pretty much transform the world into dharma teachings. So everyone's interested and compelled and fulfilled, or getting fulfilled, instead of being always disappointed by the false assumptions and cheap baubles of the world. Ram Prasad sings in one of his songs, the glitter. There's another song he sings where he says, "O soul, you're just a sparkling fish, sporting on the surface of waters where death is granted as fishing grounds. Quick, dive deep before death casts his net." So the soul is always, the unrealized soul, unenlightened soul is always sporting on the surface of the waters, because the sun sparkles there, and it's attracted to this glitter. See, gets hypnotized by all these lights on the surface, and doesn't know that death will cast its net soon. But death's net can only reach so far, so if the soul dives deep into the teachings of the Dharma, then it's not anymore hypnotized by surface glitters, money and wealth and fame and so forth. Those things just appear as parts of life, naturally. But the Dharma is more important. It dives deep into the Dharma. And then it stays free. Even in the body, it stays free. That's called Jivan Mukta, living liberated soul. So the Dharma plays a big part of that. Dharmic activities and divine activities too. So as we said, we saw this chart last time as we wrapped up chapter 4. And there was, actually we did wrap up chapter 4 last time, but there was a few charts that we didn't get to because of lack of time. And those also have to do with these final slokas of the 4th chapter. So I'd like to backtrack to them to make sure that we get the teaching. One of those is about our heroes. This sloka 22, which we passed over pretty quick last time, is "Injure us not in respect of children, grandchildren, and life." He's talking to Shiva again, Rudra, the terrible Rudra who removes all forms. He said, don't injure us in respect to children, grandchildren, and life, nor in respect of cows and horses, which were really big to own back then in those times. I guess they still are in some walks of life. "Do not destroy our heroes in thy anger, O Rudra. We invoke thee always with offerings." That's actually the last sloka of chapter 4. And like I said, we're back and tracking to it because we really didn't get a chance to show the charts that correlate with it. One of them being this new chart on how to renounce. Natural renunciation in 4 phases. Let's look at that. And then we'll cap off chapter 4 in a big way. Well, here's how the scripture puts it. I told you earlier that this scripture was the Jivan Mukti Viveka. It really means Jivan Mukti, I just mentioned that, a living liberated state. And then Viveka, discrimination. How to reach a living liberated state through applying your discrimination between the real and the unreal. It's all a mental exercise at this point. You know, you've done your Hatha Yoga, you've done your breathing exercises, hopefully you moved through them and didn't get caught in them. And now you're going on towards concentration and meditation and picking up, inner clues to the secrets of existence and spiritual growth and getting some spiritual success. So you've moved beyond these lower limbs of yoga. And now all of a sudden you realize that I have to do some remaking of the mind. So it's all getting into my own consciousness and making adjustments there. It has nothing to do anymore with walking or breathing or sitting or acting, although those things can become problematic if they're not dharmic actions. Then you can be adding karmas where you should just be neutralizing them. So you realize that as long as you've come to a relatively karmic neutral state, that all the work that you do in schools like Vedanta and Buddhism, and actually the higher limbs of yoga, are not about action and physical things. They're about the mind. And if you make adjustments in the mind, then you'll clarify things out here in the body and on earth, in nature. That's where you really know about these connections between the act and the thought. That thought is father to the deed. That's how a Western savant puts that, right? Thought is father to the deed. So you make connections like that, and also connections between nature and soul. That one comes from the other. Before you thought there were two separate things. There was a soul, if you believed in one, and then there was nature, and there never the twain shall meet. Now you realize that all the forms of nature came from the formless part of consciousness. There were seeds there, and they got strewn by the act of the mind, and then they sprouted, and then you had to deal with the crop, you see, whatever it was, weeds or fruits, or combination of both, like a hog plum. See, a hog plum is a fruit that has all pit and skin and very little flesh, and if you eat the flesh it gives you indigestion. So it's not a very good crop to have to end up with. So Ramakrishna's talk, that's about the world, how unreal it is. If you end up with just the world and not your consciousness connected to the world, then it's like a hog plum. It's like eating a hog plum's flesh. It gives you indigestion all the time. So you should always have this ability for freedom. And that freedom is going to take place through these natural phases of renunciation. Now the Jivan Mukti Viveka is really a scripture for monks, mostly. Teachings are for very, very high and not recommended for householders to read. But when Swami's told me to read it, because I was Dharma teacher, so I read it. And when I read through it, I picked out certain things that do apply to householders, especially householders that don't have children, families, so much anymore. They have some time on their hands, and they have an interest in spiritual life, and so can't really be called necessarily specifically householders. They might be like in their vanaprasthan stage of just living in the world but not of it kind of idea. So this is one of those teachings that applied to that cross-section of being. And it's put in a condensed form in this first quote, or sloka. This is how you renounce if you're a householder in that level. First, renounce desire for enjoyment. Then the inner mental desires that foster it. Keep the pure desires, such as desire for friendship. Now this is all gradated, and I put it in another form here, which we'll look at in a minute. So first, renounce the desire for enjoyment. Doesn't mean that you can't still enjoy, but you renounce the desire for enjoyment, because that's what's pulling you around the world. Oh, I think I'll run get that. Okay, I've got that. I'm satisfied, but I'm not satiated yet. I want to get it again. See? So you're running around after desire, That's based on a desire for enjoyment, and that's based upon the inner mental desire that's causing you to remember, thought and act again, right? So first you renounce the desire for enjoyment. Enjoyments come to you, fine. So will sufferings. Doesn't mean that that you can get beyond enjoyment and suffering. They're going to be a part of your life, but you have renounced the desire for it. Now you're going to renounce the inner mental desire that caused it. Basically, this is where you're moving inward, because most people operate just in the outer world, remember, and they're looking for food, and they're looking for sustenance, and they're looking for occupations and pleasures and enjoyments and so forth, looking for excitement, like we said at the beginning of the path. And maybe they're not looking for truth or God at all. Maybe they don't even believe in it. So in this case then, if you want to make a move towards your inner nature, you want to take those two forms of desire and renounce them. Next, in the meantime, keep the pure desires, such as desire for friendship. that's an interesting dance, as they say. I've seen people go through it, and they find out that when they begin to practice spiritual life, those people they thought who were their friends were not. Happens so often. I see people in the room shaking their head up, acknowledging that right here. So, where are your true friends? If your guru is authentic, your guru is going to be one of your true friends. Vivekananda said that. He said, my parents loved me, no doubt, but no one ever loved me as much as that Brahmin priest, that avatar of the age, Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. I know that he loved me unconditionally. So you'll find that there are beings in your life, maybe hidden for the time being, that these people with fair faces and false hearts, fair weather friends, I think they call them. Vivekananda called it fair faces and false hearts. Those people are hiding your true friends. So when you start to practice spiritual life, they get irritated with you because you're not seeking desire anymore. And you're also trying to give up the root of your desire, and that's not what they want at all. So they'll start to filter away, and then as a result, you'll think, oh, I've lost my friends, but then a few true friends will step forward in your life, and you're well on your way now to spiritual life and its proper supports. Someone who will always be there for you. And then next he says, practice giving up even that inwardly, desire for friendship, and seek knowledge. So most often the two go hand in hand. When you get true friends, they're also interested in seeking knowledge. Or you could put it this way, getting rid of ignorance. They still feel the press of ignorance in them, and they don't like it. They've had a taste of freedom, but that taste is getting conditioned by old karmas that are coming back, you see. First you get a glimpse of God, then it's covered, then you get a glimpse of God, you see. Or these Shaktis are working. You get a glimpse of them, and then they go away, you see. And actually, they're just coming out of your own consciousness, showing themselves to you, and then because of your limitations, they disappear again. If you can learn to get rid of your coverings and limitations, what the Buddhists call their conditionings, then that would be there all the time. See? So this is the subtleties of realizing your own consciousness. It's an inner work, as we were saying. And it has to be done in a different way than you would, pull coverings off of something outside, like a banana peel or something. See? It's an inner covering, is more subtle. But this is the work really to be done in terms of this kind of a teaching. Finally, give up even the desire for knowledge. Like I said, ignorance is in your flesh, knowledge is another thorn. You take the ignorance thorn out of your flesh with the knowledge thorn. Then give them, so that's what they mean. It's Ramakrishna's nice explanation. That thorn of knowledge, that thorn which is the thorn of knowledge, is keeping you from realizing truth, because truth and knowledge are a duality. Now you're aware of both. Before you were only aware of ignorance, your own ignorance. Now you're aware of knowledge and its superiority to ignorance, and it can actually get rid of ignorance. But knowledge alone is not going to be enough. There's what's called truth that's beyond knowledge, because knowledge will always have that memory of ignorance in it. So you begin to go towards truth. It says here, abide in what remains, and give up that by which you renounce. So this is like an Ashtavakra Samhita teaching too. It's mentioned in all the non-dual scriptures that you engage in the process of renunciation. The final stage of that is always renounce renunciation. You use renunciation as far as it will take you, but then renunciation alone has to be renounced in the end to get the nectar of naturalness. That's how the Ashtavakra Samhita puts it. Beyond the renunciation is the renunciation of renunciation, and beyond that is the nectar of naturalness. So it means you don't have to renounce anymore. You did the process to realize all this was Brahman, so what is there left to renounce? Right? But you couldn't possibly jump to that conclusion from an earlier stage. You had to move through all those levels of renunciation to check yourself and to check the path and to finally come to the truth in full maturity. It's called mature renunciation, to chaga in Sanskrit. So you couldn't jump steps on it or second guess it. So you had to go through the process to realize it, else you would never be quite sure of it, you see. So this is how it's put in the sloka. You can see how it's put here in terms of images and sayings. I took these out of the scripture itself. So first, give up base desires and sense objects. That's called Vishaya Vasana. Vishaya is what is Mayik, what is illusory, especially in terms of what the senses think is real. Vasana means desire. So Vishaya Vasana, you must give those up, the desires for unreal things. Then Manasa. You know, see the word Manasa always is mind, right? So the desires of the mind, now give up internal desires. You gave up the external ones. Now look in your mind and say, why do I desire things externally and then get frustrated when I don't get them and get bloated when I do, glutted by desire? Either way, desire leaves me with a kind of spiritual indigestion, whether it's fulfilled or not. And even when it is fulfilled, it comes back on me, so it's always having to be like a fire, having to be fed. So where is that coming from? It's coming from my mind desiring. If I could get to that and reduce it or completely destroy it, then my mind would be peaceful. You know, I'd be free. I wouldn't desire anything. Then third, pranaya vasana. Give up social relations and cultivate knowledge alone. That is, that friendship in social circles or people you thought were your friends, and your real friends who do appear, of course. Even those, you're going to want to substitute knowledge in place of those. It's a natural phenomena. If it's done in the terms of a yogi, he goes in a cave and does it. That's why you hear about them leaving, like Krishna says in the Gita, to Uddhava in the Uddhava Gita, he says, love of lonely study. You should have love of lonely study. So you want to go away and contemplate yourself. And the teachings are going to help you, so you contemplate them in accord with yourself, without any distractions from anyone, friends, family, anyone. To get your own act together, as they say. Then finally you give up knowledge and you realize truth. And that's how natural renunciation in 4 phases goes on. And it's for the effacement of latent impressions, the scripture says. The word for that in Sanskrit is samskara. Latent impressions are mental impressions in your mind that are there from previous lives that are causing you to act the way you do in this life. If I could find them, locate them, and shine a laser on them, see, sort of like nowadays you have a kidney stone, they shine a impulse on it. They send an impulse through it to break it up, you know, so then the pieces will come out, can pass, you see. So in that way you want to find those mental stones, those mind stones that are blocking the passages, you see, of free movement, and shine a laser light on them and just to fragment them so that the parts can die. See, it's not one solid mental impression anymore, it's just memories of what it was like. Maybe that's wisps, but those are all gone, they're being annihilated. So that would be something to graduate to. Now here's some other quotes from the same scripture. This teaching is about how to conduct your mind, and how the mind is actually doing this fourfold renunciation. First, the beginner should fill 2 parts of the mind with objects of enjoyment, 1 part of the study of the scriptures, and 1 part attending on a guru. Doesn't it kind of remind you of this Dharma Holy Company down here? You see, the beginning part of the wisdom path is that you can't get rid of all your enjoyments yet, so you just keep 2 parts of your mind on enjoyment. But a 3rd part you give to study of the scriptures, and a 4th part, 4 out of 4 that is, you give to your guru, attending your guru, listening to the classes, serving the guru, and so forth. So these two were missing when the mind was all on enjoyment, seeking enjoyment and getting suffering in part as a return. So the beginner must keep two of these, because you can't just rip it all out by the roots and expect the beginner to survive. So you add in Dharma and teacher. And that's how a beginner proceeds, in this way of renunciation. And the next stage is the intermediate student should fill one part of the mind with objects of enjoyment, one part by reflecting on the scriptures, and two parts attending on the guru. So you sacrifice one of those parts of enjoyment away, and you add one part of taking the guru. Now here's where your true friend comes forth again too. If your guru's an authentic Dharma teacher who has the four qualifications of Stotriya, of Vrijana, Kamahata, and Brahmavid, that is, lives a pure, unostentatious life, knows the essence of the scriptures and can communicate them to you, has no desire for you except that you get enlightenment, and is a knower of God, then that's an authentic teacher. So you begin to attend upon that teacher as much as you can. Nowadays, welcome live streaming audience. See, they can't attend upon my classes all the time. They're far flung around the world. So now you can attend upon a guru through your screen. Not the most optimum way of doing it. You like to be in the presence of the guru and the sangha to pick up those vibrations. But because of the distance, the great distance, and these modern mechanisms, you can do something for your spiritual life by tuning in on those kinds of classes. So that's an example of course, it wasn't there in these times, but you have that possibility now to attend upon the guru more often, and those teachings that the guru gives. Now, that's for the beginning and the intermediate student, right? How about the advanced student? What is the mind like? Fill half the mind with study of scriptures, the remaining half with worship of the Lord, the teacher. So that's how enjoyment gets renounced. See, I mean, basically we looked at it here, now we're looking at it through how it actually happens as a process. I think it's hard for you to renounce the mind, or not renounce the desires of your mind, then you can do it by degrees like this. It's the case with anything that you replace something that is old, worn out, tired, and habitual with something that's new and fresh and inspiring. So at first you don't recognize how inspiring the teachings can be, how helpful the guru can be to you, and how helpful your spiritual family can be to you as contrasted to your worldly family. I don't need to talk much about that, I hope. Worldly families are no fun, especially nowadays. They're bound, and they're wanting to bind you. If you have this slightest inkling for freedom, they get threatened. See, they don't want you free. They want you bound like them. It's your karma family. It's your blood family. And the devotees of the Lord have known this forever, that your spiritual family is your sangha family. It's not your blood family in most cases. Sometimes you'll be fortunate to be born with another spiritual aspirant in your family. Most of the times that's not the case. So that is going to reflect then how the mind prepares itself. It acquires a taste for Dharma and for teachings, and the desires that it sought in family life begin to wane. They begin to diminish. They don't call you so much anymore because you have found them to be ultimately unsatisfying, unfulfilling, and quite often resulting in chaos and problems and the building of samskaras, right? You're building up these impressions in your mind about families, and those draw you back into birth with families again. It's a real problem. It's what Buddha meditated in the Bo tree, to get rid of this desire to come back in families. Embodiment, however you want to put it. Ancestor worship. There must be a way beyond ancestor worship that was going on in India at the time, and why not? Why just India? Japan and other places too. So there must be a way beyond that cycle. So for those beings who are ready, who want to get beyond that, who feel the need to, who feel the call for realization, for enlightenment, then here's a way out of the ancestors, the Pitris and the Bhutas, those two lower worlds that people are recycling on all the time. Humorously, I call it the Petri dish. See, it's a double entendre. The Pitris is a Sanskrit word for your ancestors, but in science it's also that culture, right, that you're growing inside of a Petri dish. So it's very much apropos in that way. You want to get rid of this, out of this culture that's brewing, and be free. You know why? Because you can come back and help your ancestors if you do. Otherwise you can't. You become a part of the problem. You get swept into the problem, become a part of the cause of the problem. Because unless you're strong enough to live amongst your ancestors and be free of them, that's a rare soul. Most of the time you'll see people leaving their family. Monks, they're called, or sannyasins, or mendicants, wandering souls. If I can't do it here, see, they're not listening. And either I don't have the power to make them listen, or it's not time for them to wake up. Whatever the case may be, I will go away. I will get my own enlightenment, and then I'll come back later and see if they'll listen then, when I have more light. So it's nothing unnatural about this. As far as spiritual life is concerned, it's very natural. And the teachings for monks, there's even a concession in there for vanaprastins and householders that can help them practice this path of renunciation. This isn't for everyone. There are other paths you can take. I mean, we saw, how you can move through different paths. Bhakti, jnanam, meditation, karma, even action is a path if you do it right. But here's a teaching out of the Dharma that is monastic in taste and tone, but can be applied to you if you have the wherewithal to enter into it and commit to it. You can say, I'm going to work on my desires and lessen them. You can even start there and see what happens. See if you feel more free. Doesn't it happen to you anyway when you clean your house or something? See? Or you move. Oh, I can get rid of lots of stuff now. It was collecting in your attic and here and there, stuff you didn't need. And all of a sudden you just feel good because you got rid of like half of your belongings. Oh, it's nothing unnatural again. See? You try it now with the desire for objects, not just the objects themselves. You see, try it now in there and see how much. Do some house cleaning in there and see how much freer you feel. See? And as a result, since you do feel freer, then what is it you see now in your meditation, being freer? What is it you realize and understand? Take account, take stock of what happened in that. It's all about realizing your original consciousness and getting rid of these conditionings. It's house cleaning of the best kind, and like I say, both Vedanta and Buddhism are well known for it. India has contributed, at the very least, of the 7 or 8 major religions of the world, 2. Buddhism and Vedanta. I mean, Buddhism and Vedanta, basically. That's pretty amazing, you see, that there are 2 paths. Now, if you want to call Jainism one of the major religions of the world, although it's not heavily populated now, yes, India contributed 3. See. And when you look at them, they have this particular distinction. Give up the world. It's unreal. You'll be happier. Everyone will be happier if you do. See? So it's a teaching to look at, renunciation. It's a word that scares people in the West, but that's only because they've become habituated to materialism as a path. Our religion here it's really not Christianity or Judaism, it's science. Science is winning the field. If it wasn't the religion of the early 1900s, it is now. And so that's materialism, basically, physics. It's got a lot to share with us about physical things, but nothing to share with us about God, about spirit, not even about the mind. You'd have to go to psychology for that. But our psychology in the West believes in one lifetime only. Freud, Jung, because they never had a Hindu man on their therapy table, you see, who sat up and said, "What are you talking about, Mr. Freud? You've lived many lifetimes, and so have I. I learned that from Krishna thousands of years ago when the Gita told us that we had many lifetimes." So this is all a shift in consciousness, a shift in thinking process and all that. And it can be brought about very readily and very quickly with renunciation. Again, not a popular word in the West, and probably not a lot of people going to rush towards it, but try it as a devotee, as an intermediate or advanced aspirant, or even a beginning aspirant. Try giving up desire for objects in your mind. Last quote, and this is by myself. I mentioned this earlier because I wanted to say something about Pratipaksha Bhavanam. It's one of those 7-syllable words like Anavastitattvani and Alabdha Bhumikatva. Those are yogic words, you see. Because there's really no simple and easy way to explain some of these spiritual concepts, they had to come up with these profound, confounded words, you see. And that's one of them. This is beautiful. Pratipaksha Bhavanam. If you want to put it in simple English, it's raising an opposite wave. Remember, was it St. Francis or said, "Where there's hatred, let me sow love. You know, where there's ignorance, let me sow wisdom," that kind of thing. So you want to raise an opposite wave to counteract, water the flowers instead of the weeds, is how we put it in even simpler terms. So you just quit brooding about things that ultimately don't matter, and you just put your mind on things that are important. Important means matters of the spirit, not how important going to work is, or how important gathering wealth is, or having cars and houses and children. The real important things, in spirituality are my relationship with God. That's the most important thing. Until I realize that I'm one with God, I have to nurture my relationship with God. One's called duality and the other's called non-duality. So until I'm ready for non-duality, I and my Father are one, be thee perfect as thy Father in heaven is perfect, then I have to nurture duality. I have to nurture my relationship with God, with Guru, with scriptures, with Sangha. And if it's a losing battle, it's too bad. If 20-some years of SRV trying to exist in the West does not end up in success, or any great success, even if it only helps a few people, it's very unfortunate. But we've tried to make an inroad into Western ignorance and arrogance through these beautiful teachings of love, compassion, wisdom, and humility, so that inroads can be made and a few souls can get free. Sri Ramakrishna had this beautiful story. Everywhere he went, anything he saw happening in the world, it had a spiritual connotation to it. He looked into the meaning of things. So there was this one time they took him to a grinding mill, and somebody was feeding grains of rice or wheat or something down into this funnel, and the funnel took it into between these two great stones as big as this room, round and flat, one on top of the other, right? And the grains would go in between them, and one wheel would turn this way and one wheel would turn that way. It's like Maya, see? And it would grind, this heavy weights of these two oppositely rotating stone wheels would grind the rice into flour, or wheat into flour. And so he watched this, and you could just kind of imagine what he was thinking, Oh, what teaching is he going to come up with about this? He said, oh, look there. Some of the rice grains that went down the funnel got caught in the little space between where the wood timber passes through the stone. and helps it turn, right? Because each was attached to a timber that made it turn opposite, you see. So where the timber met the stone had a hole cut in it, then there was this little space, and some of the rice grains made it into there, and they weren't getting ground. Yeah, imagine what he was thinking. Some of these souls never got caught in Maya between the wheels, and they never became grist for the mill, as the saying goes, you see. And all the rest were ground again and again in the wheels of Maya. So these few souls here, you see, were the exceptional souls that practiced these kinds of austerities, if you will. See, holy company, seeking the Dharma, scriptural study, contemplation, austerity, self-effort, getting some attainment finally. Rare to do that. Rare the soul that would even attempt it. But fortunate the one who did. See? Even if they did it lifetime to lifetime, right? Even if it over, like Buddhism says, 3 lifetimes to get free, then I might as well start with this lifetime and implementing some of these practices into my life. And I'll find myself in a better position each time I'm born. In fact, pretty soon I'll realize that I have been born and where I came from. After that, I'll realize that I'm unborn. You see, in 3 stages again. The unborn soul. I mean, I could sing it for you if you want. Aham nirvikalpo nirakara rupo vibhutvacha sarvatra sarvendriyanam nacha sanganaiva Chidananda Rupaha Shivoham Shivoham Om. And the other line is Muktir Nameya. Muktir Nameya. I am formless. Nirakara Rupa, I have no qualities, no attributes. I see everything by the senses, yet I'm beyond the senses. And I am everything that can be apprehended, and I'm beyond what can be apprehended as well. I am Shiva, I am Shiva. Muktir Nameya is the part I didn't sing. So basically that's the 6th verse of Nirvana Shatkam by Shankar, whom we're studying today in this class. We're observing his teachings. So that's how the realized soul would feel, who had accomplished these 4 levels of renunciation, and why Svetasvatara Upanishad states that, do not destroy our heroes. In thy anger, O Rudra, we invoke thee always with offerings. Do not injure us in respect to our children, our grandchildren, or our lives. So this means we can't just jump to renunciation and give everything up in a thrice. That might be the case in a couple very unique souls, like beings like Vivekananda and Ramana Maharshi and Sri Ramakrishna and so forth, Avadhuts who go to caves and so forth. Probably they've come to it through many lifetimes, many of them, unless they're Nityasiddhas. They've come to it through many lifetimes. So eventually it'll come to you, and you'll have the opportunity to try and understand it. Shankara himself says, what are the difficult things in life? He says this in the Vivekachudamani. In spiritual life, what are the difficult things? First, gaining a human body. If you get a human body, there's your opportunity for freedom. You're not going to find it in the animals, plants and insects, or in hell-bound beings in the lower realms. They're not, they have very troublesome forms in karma. So if you have a human birth, that's difficult, he says. What's more difficult? Having strength of body. What's more difficult? Purity of mind. What's more difficult than that? Gaining the will to study the scriptures. The will of the words of the seers. What's most difficult? Developing the ability to understand the meaning of the scriptures, so that when the words are spoken to you, you have samadhi. It goes straight in without any impediment in the way. The truth goes right to your heart, right to your pure mind, without any confusion or interruption or distraction. Awakens you immediately. Because in the old days, they used to whisper the mantra in your ears, and if you were ready, you would go into samadhi when they whispered it. See? That's how unconditioned your mind was. They had made you ready. The 4 qualifications in Vedanta are all about that, or the 7 qualifications in Tantra are all about that. And Buddhism too has its certain qualifications, 8-fold path and so forth that you have to satisfy before this unique ability to understand the meaning of what's being said to you on the spiritual level occurs to you. So he puts that in levels of degree of difficulty. If you've got a human birth, good. If you have strength of body, good. If you have, your mind is getting pure, great. Now try and develop a habit of study of scriptures. Because in India there's very few, let's say, if any, veiled scriptures. There's just revealed scriptures. That's the new chart I made before I left Hawaii that I mentioned 2 weeks ago. We showed it in the class, Success and Failure in Spiritual Life, if you were watching. It has all the scriptures that you'd want to study, that I myself have studied, out of India's vast storehouse of scriptures, on a list there for you to write down, I got to read that, I got to read that. And of course, one of them would be this Svetashvatara Upanishad that we're finishing the 4th chapter of again. We wanted to go back and look at it again so that we could bring this new chart into bear with that final sloka. As far as, we have a little time, as far as do not injure us in respect of children and grandchildren. I'm not sure last time, I don't think we looked at the Varnashrama.
You didn't give them a chance to hear that final quote about
All right, good. So I've been reminded here that we didn't finish the final quote here. Pratipakshabhavanam, right? Thank you for reorienting me. Raising an opposite wave in the mind is called Pratipakshabhavanam. It is a much overlooked and underestimated method of spiritual practice. It is the simple way of watering the flowers and not the weeds. Here, the aspirant does not strive to root out desires, to squelch emotions, to destroy the passions, or force austerities. Instead, slowly transforms the mind by fixing it on the Dharma and its teachings alone. As you can see in those 4 ways I mentioned, that people are trying to, when they're dealing with their mind and their emotions and their families and so forth, these are usually the things they come up against. They either have to somehow squelch their emotions, destroy their passions, force their austerities, or try and sort of rip out their desires by the roots without anything to place in its place. But Pratipakshabhavanam, if you consider it, just raising an opposite wave, is a natural everyday practice you can do, and it's based upon just putting your mind in the teachings. You can't raise an opposite wave if you don't have something to raise. So the opposite wave is waves of Dharma, isn't it? Coming from the ocean of teachings, that is India's own receptacle, its own storehouse. India has several storehouses. There's a whole storehouse of Vedic sacrifices and rituals. That would be more bhakti path. There's storehouse of wisdom, which represent the Jnana Yoga path. So look into one of those storehouses and come out rich with whatever path you want to follow. In this case, it would be placing your mind on the Dharma. It's what I've been teaching for 20 years here, basically. I like the bhakti path. I had bhakti first in my life, then I got the teachings. It doesn't happen that way with many people. They don't have bhakti, they don't have love of God. Most people have to get rid of ignorance by wisdom first, and then they can love God. Because before they get rid of their ignorance, they're loving everything they thought was God, or think is God, and it all ends up to be the wrong thing. They're looking for God in all the wrong places, or loving God in the wrong ways. But as soon as ignorance disappears, that same love that you had misplaced on all of these illusions and half-truths and so forth, all of a sudden transforms. It's a transmutation of mind, and all of a sudden those very same things show up authentic love for everything from your own family to your Dharma family and onwards into your teacher and to the rishis of India who gave us these teachings. See? The revealed scriptures they're called. So that's a quote I had to sort of fashion out of my own experience to laud the practice of pratipakshibhavanam, how you can, as I said, just do it in the mind. Yes, it can be done morally. Where there's hatred, let me sow love, and so forth and so on. But it should also be done as a practice that goes deeper than that. Because how are you going to bring love to this world, which is unreal, which is always full of hatred? You're not going to get rid of hatred here. It's a part of the world. So when you understand that, you withdraw from trying to change the world, and you change this, and then you see the world differently. And then people see you seeing the world differently. You see what I mean? And then they mimic you. You see, the gurus, they mimic the seers. They imitate them. And that's how to make a change to a constantly changing world. Otherwise it doesn't work. It doesn't wash. It hasn't worked for millennia. We've had the same problems, the same wars, the same violence, the same hatred. Isn't it? Same diseases, maybe even more. Now, see, because we've been playing with ignorance too long. Or we've been hanging out in the realm of lower knowledge too long, and we've never really moved to this Dharma, placing our mind in the Dharma. We've never had enough people that did that experiment with consciousness yet. So I think I'll just try something with my consciousness here. I think I'll just, for 20 years, do nothing but study the Gita, see, and meditate on Krishna. Or even more expansive than that, meditate on all the scriptures of India, all the darshanas of India, the major religions and so forth. Develop an idea of universality that goes beyond tolerance and acceptance and actually arrives at complete understanding that that religion is indigenous to your soul, that there's no such thing as a foreign religion. And that would be smacking of the Dharma. You would have dharmic vibrations in all of that, and then you would be engaging in this practice of pratipakshibhavanam in the right way. So that is, thank you for reminding me to finish that chart with that chant. And now let's look in the remaining 10 minutes or so to what is meant by injure us not in respect of children, grandchildren, and life, nor in respect of cows and horses. So this everyday life that was a part of Indian life back in the day, it's probably 4,000 to 5,000 years prior to Christian era. What was going on there? They were really looking at it from the terms of a caste system that was in perfect operation back then, which in more modern times fell apart, and a lot of problems were there in it. But we don't want to look at just the problems at the end of an era. We want to look at how things succeeded in an earlier era, and so that we can bring that back, right? Because the reason why their Dharma caste system works so much is because it was a Dharma Shrama, or a Varna Shrama, that it was based in Dharma and Varna, family and teachings. The two were put together. And that's why the caste system lasted so long, had such success, and produced a lot of enlightened souls. They're called rishis, or yogis, or avatuts, or sannyasins. Even householder yogis, they came out of the householder fold, were perfected beings too. So That's not seen in most nations. See it a little bit in China, more recently in Tibet, you know. But in India, it had it in spades a long time ago. And it was because of, it connects very much with this Shiva, Shakti, Dharma, and Pratipaksha Bhavanam, and renunciation, and everything that we've studied reflecting the end of this chapter of the Satsanga Upanishad this morning for 3 hours. So in this teaching is very simple. You can see it right there, that the Varnashrama consists of those 4 castes. And the first quote there from the Gita, that is Bhagavad Gita, "He from whom is the evolution of all beings, by whom all this is pervaded, worshipping him with his own duty, mankind attains perfection." Talking about God with form here. Whereas the Svetashvatara Upanishad, up to these last 2 slokas of this chapter, we're talking about the formless God, that Brahman. Now they shift it to a form of Shiva, or it could just as easily be said a form of Krishna, a divine being, an Ishvara form. They're the ideal of India. So this is God with form we're talking about. Now you see there are those 4 castes, the Brahmanas, the Vaishyas, the Kshatriyas, and the Shudras. It's interesting not only on a spiritual and dharmic level, but on a historic level. So if you're interested in that, you know, I've heard of the 4 caste system, then you can pick up a little bit of knowledge on it. The Shudras, starting at the bottom of the ladder, are servants, basically. Selfless action consisting of service to all castes and classes is the duty of the Shudra, born of their own nature. So they're born of their karma, and their samskaras have to do with serving. Mostly they've gotten very good at it, if they're effective. And they know their station in life, and they reach perfection through it. You think maybe we can only reach perfection if we get rich. But what about the yogis who reached perfection and they were only poor? You see, so it's not a matter about having or having not, haves and have-nots. It's a matter of spiritual qualification and spiritual characteristics, and the Shudras have those, pun intended, in spades. They'll till the earth, they'll serve with foods and so forth, and of their own nature they will reach perfection in their own caste. Krishna says wouldn't be right of them to try and be a priest or a warrior, because that would be following someone else's dharma. Even if they did it well, it wouldn't conduce to their perfection. You should fulfill your duty inside your own dharma, how you were born, and that's how to proceed. There are other lifetimes when, you know, possibly you could be born in a different way. You could even be born as a sannyasin, see, as a free soul, like Swamiji, if you want to take that. See, but in the meantime, you, by your own nature, what you assess, you proceed in that way. And same with then the Vaishyas appear. Agriculture, cattle rearing, the business of trade and selling and earning based in honesty, these are some of the duties of the Vaishya born of their own nature. Now remember, we're taking this in context of injure is not in respect of children, grandchildren, and life, on cows and horses. So everything that's in the 4 caste system, they want Shiva to protect it. Usually you would say, Vishnu, would you protect it? Because he's the sustainer. But in this part of the Upanishad, they brought out Rudra, the terrible, because he's destroying ignorance. And ignorance is what's going to ruin the caste system. If any of these don't do their job, like if the Shudra, if the Vaishnava doesn't sell and earn in honesty, does it in dishonesty, that's going to weaken the whole fabric of society, as we know, and the walls will come tumbling down eventually. Same with the Shudra, if he doesn't serve selflessly according to his own nature, that's going to damage the caste system. And Shudras are really pretty much salt of the earth at the root of things. See, this whole edifice is based all the way up to the Brahmin priests on the Shudras, really. So one of the problems with the caste system falling down is that the Brahmanas took advantage of the Shudras and started taking money from them and started taking goods from them and started putting them into service and not giving them the Dharmic teachings. The Dharma should be for everyone, no matter what caste you're in. So that's how the caste system really deteriorated from the inside out. It wasn't just a matter of history, that time erodes everything. So you'll see that happen even with the Dharma, and it'll have to be resurrected. But in this case, things erode from the inside out because of adharma, because of adharmic acts and thoughts, and people not keeping to the ideal, holding up the standard, you see. Now let's look at the warriors. They're called kshatriyas. Now actually Vivekananda was born as a kshatriya in a kshatriya family in this in the 1800s. So basically his family was of a warrior caste, and it shows right there that a warrior caste family could have a sannyasin born to them. You see, so you could be a kshatriya one lifetime, and another lifetime decide to be born as a priest or so forth. So from lifetime to lifetime it's flexible, but inside of the given lifetime they want you to fulfill the duty in which you're born into. And unless you're a very special soul, you can't transgress that law. Very few will move into sannyas from these stations. Those are rare souls that do, like born in a merchant family and all of a sudden move away from there and become a sannyas, move out of money making and all that. So that does happen, but this caste system is fairly well enforced so that doesn't happen very often. Sort of like here, if our children show tendencies of disinterest in the world, we think it's a disease. So we give them a pill or get them married. It's the same in India, although India in many cases knows better because they had a whole history of soul, sannyasins, yogis. They're aware of illumination and enlightened souls. But still, it doesn't make parents in India any less worldly in the case that they want their children to follow in their own footsteps. It's just human nature. So we do have that one concession, though, in India, that the sannyasin path is open to all, and they can leave the caste system and follow it if they're an exceptional soul. Doesn't mean they won't get resistance. Who are we talking about today? Shankara, right? Whose birthday was recently. Shankara himself, his mother wouldn't let him leave and take sannyas. He was in his teens. He wanted to do that. Or actually preteen, he was like 10 or 11. And he said, "Mother, let me renounce the world." She said, "Oh, you're too young. Besides, you should stay here and take care of me." And so then Shankara got caught in an alligator's jaws in the river nearby. And alligator was trying to pull him into the river and so forth and eat him. So they sent for his mother, and mother came running. And Shankara said from the caught inside the alligator's jaws, "Mother, this alligator will not eat me if you let me take sannyas and leave home." And so what could a mother do? So she said, "Yes, okay, I concede, you can take sannyas and leave home." The alligator, he got freed from the jaws of the alligator and then left a year later at 12 to go wandering India. So these are examples and stories of great beings, and because Shankara was teaching Greybirds in his teens. He was a very advanced soul in a very young body. He knew all these scriptures we're talking about today by the time he was 10. Had them in his memory. So this means past lifetimes, many lifetimes of illumination in his case. You may have names for that in Tibetan Buddhism and so forth, but in India, it's just, you don't really have a name for it. Because you're really not reborn again at all. You just emanate as many times as you want as a free soul, and it's up to your choosing when you do so. So something about the kshatriya and how this caste system, their heroism, vigor, firmness, resourcefulness, fearlessness during encounters, generosity, and lordliness are the qualities of the kshatriya. So it might not be like maybe the soldiers of today, might not have compassion and lordliness, Maybe they're not thinking of the good of society, they just want to go and dominate, or they want to become a colonel or a general or get money or whatever. But in the kshatriya that's a real warrior, you find these qualities of firmness in encounter. You see, they're not going to give ground, they're going to defend. But they also have compassion, lordliness, and understanding in them, so that if there's any way to avoid violence, they would. They would only take to it if it's forced upon them, as it were. So a whole different idea of what military would be, or police force, or any kind of a governing body or unit in politics, needs to have these qualities in it to ensure that the caste system, that all walks of life remain supported and just. It's a justness that we're all feeling is lacking more and more in politics in the West lately. The injustices. Now, at the top of this many-tiered system or four-tiered system are the Brahmin priests, and not really very much of a comparison to the West, the priests here, the priestcraft, but in some ways an interesting contrast. But in case of the Brahmanas, when they were upright and righteous, then serenity, self-restraint, austerity, purity, forgiveness, uprightness, knowledge, realization, perception of what is beyond life and death. These are qualities of the Brahmanas, the Brahmin priests. That's a lot of qualities in one sense. Very, very admirable things that you would possess. And also knowledge of what lies beyond life and death, so you can tell people about the birthless, deathless nature of the soul as related by the seers in the scriptures. That's really the responsibility of the priests. And if they fail at that responsibility and just start doing rituals for money and to gain followers or whatever the case may be, then you could see how there would be no religious element in society. Sound familiar? No real religious element. Nowhere to go to ask people about what's beyond life and death. Oh, the stork comes. See? It's like you get the Santa Claus story. Oh, don't talk about that. We don't speak about death. You know, you can get all sorts. You go to the priestcraft. What's beyond life and death? Heaven, hell, depending on if you accept Jesus or not. So you're getting all these stories run by you, and none of them satisfy you. None of them make sense. And you don't simply know that your karma brings you and your karma takes you away. And when you're free of that karma, you don't come and go anymore, basically, if you want to put it in a nutshell. You don't know how you come and go either. Blood runs through your veins, prana runs through your subtle veins, shakti runs through your inner veins. That's how you come and go out of the body. It's an inward process, outward, and then outward back in. It never goes outward to outward unless you're a materialist. If you think you're the body, then you'll be born again as a body, and all you'll know is matter. But as soon as you open up these inner channels, your consciousness begins to move in them, inward. And that's called spiritual awakening. And eventually it will turn into realization that these priests should have. Uprightness, knowledge, and realization. As well as the perception of what lies beyond birth and death. Well, that's a rundown of the four castes. I've already, pretty much in my own words, given you this chant. We'll end with this one by Sri Krishna. One should not abandon the duty to which one is born, even if it is attended by evil, for all undertakings are fraught with imperfections and evil. So, as fire is enveloped by smoke. So all action has evil inherent in it. It has good, it has evil, and it has mixed good and evil. If you realize that about action, that's what causes you to want to renounce it. And the way you renounce it is through knowledge. Action should give you knowledge. Knowledge then should allow you to renounce. And if that's not happening, there's a missing element somewhere in there. See? That your acts didn't give you knowledge would be the first thing to look at. Knowledge here means knowledge of who you are. Knowledge of your relationship with God. That's real knowledge. We know about the knowledge of the world, and it's never enlightened anyone. It's just brought them back to the world. So where's the disconnect here, you see? Because when I get knowledge and I can renounce, then I'm free and I'm happy whether I'm in the world or not, whether I'm in a body or not. That's for all times, you see. So it has to be seen across the board like that. And this caste system is a good way of looking at humanity across the board. We're not talking about animals and insects and ancestors, that, you know, the other side of all this. We're talking about just what happens in people's temperaments. See, I mean, if you want to put the 4 yogas with this, fairly easy to do. So you've got meditation yoga, you've got the action yoga, you've got the devotional yoga, and you've got the wisdom yoga. See? So all of these castes are temperaments that point directly to the fact that some people are of a devotional temperament, some people are contemplative, some people are active, and some people are devotion-based. And that's for a broad reckoning of how to understand humanity. If you look at the materialistic West, where's their meditation? Where's their spiritual knowledge? Where's their devotion to God? Well, I see where their action is. They have plenty of action, but no inaction. They have plenty of lower knowledge, but no higher knowledge. They have plenty of veiled scriptural knowledge, but no revealed scriptural knowledge. And their devotion, that's in question. We'll have to, the jury is still out, you see. Do they love God, or do they love the world more? Do they love God or mammon? And which one will they accept, and which one will they reject in the end? So that's my presentation today, the last 4 or 5 slokas of the Svetasvatara Upanishad. We revisited them again to really put a cap on this 4th chapter. We can start into the 5th chapter, which I will mark next visit, because we saw a few new charts able to see them in accordance with those last precious slokas about Shiva and how he destroys and he protects. So with that said, then we will end here with a chant and move on till tomorrow's class, same time here in San Francisco, same place, on Lord Buddha and his teachings. And we'll be focusing a little bit more on the Zen side of Buddhism tomorrow. Om Sato Ma Sadgamoya Tamaso Ma Joytir Gamoya Mrityor Ma Amritam Gamaya Abira Mayeti Rudrayate Dakshina Mukam Tenamam Pahinicham Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Lead us from darkness to light, from lower truth to higher truth, from the unreal to the real, and from the illusion of death to eternal life. Reach us through and through, O Lord and Mother, with thy sweet and benign presence. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om.